Hey, I'm Mark Granlund. I'm an artist from St. Paul, a painter, and I paint landscapes and still lifes. This is my show, American Still Life, that's on display at the Landmark Center in St. Paul. So I've been painting a long time, ever since I was a kid, and went to graduate school in New York City, Brooklyn College, and got my master's of fine art there. And since then, I've been teaching and painting and showing throughout the Midwest. I picked still life compositions to do in this show because I was looking at Cezanne's work. And what I love about Cezanne's work, and in particular still lifes, is that he is the father of modernism, or considered one of the fathers and founders of modernism. And so it changed the entire world in terms of perspective and of the individual. And modernism was very much a reaction against the existing norms and standards of art at the time. And so it was really big and instrumental and changed the world. And he did it by just painting these little still lifes in his studio all the time, which I think is a fascinating way to do it, just from your own studio, not going out and advocating and rallying and protesting and everything, but just changing people's thoughts on what could be. So you have this great movement of art that's powerful and changes the world. And 150 years later, the power's sort of gone, and it's really just accepted as decoration, as the accepted form of art. Any museum you go to, any store online, you go to buy art prints or anything, you will find Cezanne's work, and is sort of the standard, one of the standards of what art means. But it's lost sort of the original intent and ideas and power behind it. And so I want to play around with that in this show here, American Still Life, where I'm taking something old, trying to appropriate his imagery and his compositions and even part of his painting style, and updating it, putting it in a different context, changing things around, and having some fun with it. This is a great example of what I've been talking about. This is based on a Cezanne painting called Peaches and Pears. And in his original composition, which is very similar to this, if you go look up that image online, you'll see it looks very much like this, but I've changed a few things. So what I've gone in and changed is, instead of a tablecloth, a white tablecloth, I put in an American flag. No stars, but it's an American flag, obviously. He has a vase right here. I put in a pitcher of milk, because the old idea of apple pie, milk, baseball, that's all American kind of stuff. And then what I like about his compositions a lot is that he separates out pieces of fruit from each other, and then we'll have groups of fruit together. And he's doing that for spatial relationships, but I'm doing that to make more of a societal commentary. So we have all of these apples together on a white plate next to the milk, next to the sugary thing here, and they're all uniformly painted and the same and hanging together. And then you have fruit outside the plate that are not next to each other. They're different fruits. They're separated from this whole part of the composition. And so to me, that's a bit of a commentary about America and how we think of ourselves in terms of groups and or tribes or clans in a way, and we really identify ourselves by our groups within the broader society. And so that's how I've changed this piece up from what Cezanne was doing. So very much using his same imagery, his same style, his same composition, but changing the meaning and changing a few objects to do that. This piece is called Still Life with Liechtenstein's Table. Now this is based off of a Cezanne painting called Still Life with Cup and Saucer. And I've changed this around from his original ideas because I came across a series of Roy Lichtenstein paintings from the early 1970s, where he appropriated and recontextualized Picasso's still lifes, just like what I'm doing with Cezanne. And so what we have here is Lichtenstein's was famous for using dots. So I have a dotted wall, and then he did a lot with reflections. So I have a reflective cell phone screen on here, and of course updated it with a cell phone screen. And he also would just have patterns and stuff within his work. So this is sort of a Cezanne still life with Cezanne's apples on a plate on a table that I call Liechtenstein's table. I made this painting from a hand reproduced copy of a Cezanne. So I went online, I found a painting that somebody had made of the Cezanne original, because they don't have the rights to sell the prints of the original. So online you'll find people who hand paint a copy of the original and then sell a print of that. And then I made a third version, which was a hand reproduced image of the copy. So it gets a little removed, and that's sort of what starts happening with art in society today. People aren't valuing the original art form, the object itself, as much. They're just looking at an image and wanting something similar. And so I created this painting as a way to talk about that issue. So this piece is called Still Life with Wild Man. And again, borrowing a very well-known Cezanne still life on a table. And all I've done to change the composition is underneath the table, I put a wild man down there. Now, a wild man is an idea or a concept or a myth about wild men who live in the woods in Central Europe, and that they were savage and followed no rules, and you had to watch out for them. And I took the imagery of the wild man from a Schongauer print from the 1400s. He was a German artist. And the whole idea was that, after the Middle Ages and 1400s, eventually you get modernism that comes in, and this whole idea of decorative nature now of modernism, as I mentioned before, is sort of accepted art now, and it sort of suppresses in a way our wild man nature, or our way of creating and having no bounds when we create art. So I have a wild man under there that's just waiting to be able to come out from under the table to take over and rummage through everything and change things around and get back to something maybe just a little more meaningful than the decorative nature of modernism that we have today. I do have a lot of humor in my work. It's tongue-in-cheek humor. Some of it's right-out puns, like a bowl of nuts. Some of it is a little more calculated, in a way, humor. And that is because I just see irony in a lot of things. I think the way that we define things in history, the way we have movements in history, I just keep seeing cycles happening and imagery and meaning being repeated. And to me, after a while, that seems like a funny sort of way of looking at things and noticing things. So I put that in my artwork. So when you go look at one of my artwork, you'll find something. It might look beautiful as you approach it and wonderful, and be like, wow, that's a beautiful painting and so colorful. And then you get a little closer, and there's something a little surprising or a little jarring in there for you to notice. Something a little fun. This is a painting called Still Life with Landscape. So again, the idea of modernism being so ubiquitous in the art world, and especially in the art marketing world, that you find modernism everywhere. So in this instance, you find modernism right in the middle of a landscape. So I took a Cezanne fruit plate, and I put it right in the middle of the landscape because it's everywhere. And this landscape is a landscape I painted on site up in northern Minnesota. I do borrow styles from Cezanne and from other artists when I'm making my art at times. And it might lead to the idea that I don't have a signature style of my own painting, but kind of this landscape painting that I have in here in this piece, that style of painting is sort of the way I paint when I'm making landscapes in my own work. So that's the way I paint when I'm painting landscapes. So I have a lot of styles in here of brush strokes, outlining shapes, and brush strokes or patterns on a field of color, which are very modernist postmodernist style of painting. And so that's kind of how I naturally paint when I'm not appropriating some other artist's work. I framed all these paintings with gold frames for a reason, partly because Cezanne paintings you always see in museums. They always have these big, gaudy, oftentimes gold frames around them. So I kind of wanted to refer to that with my paintings. But then most all of these frames I found in secondhand stores. And so I would go out and hunt around and try to find gold frames in these stores. And the idea of that is just like I'm repurposing and reusing Cezanne's imagery. I want to repurpose and reuse frames for this. So that's why you'll find them all in gold frames and different kinds of frames. So that's just a little piece of my show at the Landmark Center. There's more pieces here, so I hope you come on down and see it. So if you do come on down, the building is only open by reservation, so you have to make a reservation in advance. You can go to landmarkcenter.org to make reservations to come see the show. And because it's a little bit of a hassle to make a reservation to come to a show, there's two ways that you can be rewarded for your efforts. One is while you're here at the show, we have buttons available. We have one that's an art nut button. So that's nuts from my bowl of nuts painting in the show, along with the art nut written on there. Or we just went with the little more simple and elegant art snob, because you have to make a reservation to see this show. So feel free to feel a little bit like an art snob coming and seeing it. Another way that you'll be rewarded for all your efforts to come see the show is that if you take a selfie of yourself in front of one of these paintings and post it on my Facebook or Instagram page, which both of those are Mark Granlund Studio, you'll be entered into a drawing, and at the end of the show, a winner will be chosen, and they'll receive a free print of the painting that's in the selfie behind them at the show. And if you're worried about COVID, this is a great show to come see. I know many people have been staying in their houses, not going out in public, not seeing a lot of art. But because you have to make reservations to see the show or to get in this building, actually, there's very few people in this building, and there's very few people in the gallery at any one time. It is restricted. So feel more free to come down and see the show. Masks are required, and social distancing is followed in the building, and there won't be that many people. You might be the only person in the gallery at the time. So please feel free to come on down. It's very safe. You can go see art again.